Yo, I'm Bob, into Marvel, happen to be totally blind since birth, talking about Spider-Man, the animated series, Season 1, Episode 9, ninth episode in the show overall. This one's The Alien Costume, Part 2, and it premiered on May 6th in 1995. Having to wait a week in between parts 1 and 2, and then parts 2 and 3 was insane. I was really glad to watch this thing as it premiered because, I mean, it really was, I think, a huge moment for me getting into Spider Man. I mean, I'd heard of Venom, but I had no idea I was getting to see, at least in this Spider Man universe, the origins of the character. I'd gotten to see the action figure in my own way, of course, that previous Thanksgiving. My cousin had got him in a Spider Man 3 pack along with Carnage, and I think it was Web Shooter Spider Man. He had a little web in his wrist that he could fire. And I didn't really think much of Venom. I mean, I liked him, but I didn't know who he was. I liked the teeth and all that, and his chomping jaws, but I had no idea what his backstory was or anything like that. I just thought he looked cool. And the show had just started to air at that point, and so I really loved this three-parter. So I liked how Spider-Man is on the run as the episode begins. You know, people are trying to capture him for Jameson's $1 million award, and he's just going ham in that suit. And his temper is getting the best of him. He's hurling insults right and left. And we learn that the suit, the symbiote, is vulnerable to sonic vibrations. So, I mean, it hates loud noises. So that this is the first time I'd actually gotten to see this bit of Spider-Man lore. And I like how the show goes to commercial right when he's down and out. And I thought it was really creepy that I think as Spider-Man was unconscious, the suit actually does the work for him. And we see this happen again in Spectacular Spider-Man. If you've not watched that show, I would advise you to give that a go too. It's got a really good symbiote origin story episode, or four-parter actually, when it comes to how Spider-Man gets the suit and how Venom is, you know, formed in that particular series too. But yeah, in that one you see Spider-Man kind of asleep and the suit is fighting with him inside it. We don't get to see that very much here, but I think it does get into safety as he's down for the count for a couple seconds. I think it actually moves him around while he's unconscious and inside the suit. And that was always a bit of a creepy moment for me, but I love it though, because the symbiote is all about creepy. You know, augmenting Spider-Man's powers, but at the same time making him more than a little unhinged as he is fighting off these bounty hunters. So then he decides, and I love this part, he decides to go right to the source of his troubles because, you know, he realizes that he's being framed and he's got it in for Brock here. So, I mean, it's just, he doesn't have any evidence to back it up, but, you know, he busts into Jameson's office, and I like how he accuses Brock of lying. You know, he's not giving JJ all the facts, and JJ, of course, he apparently believes Brock because JJ's always out to ruin Spider-Man's reputation. He hates the fact that he wears a mask. So he's not really taking the clown and the rhino costume seriously. He thinks Spider-Man is not really playing with a full deck right now. And here again, you know, his temper's getting the best of him, and he flees the office because I think some more bounty hunters break in and attempt to subdue him. And I like that we get to see Dr. Connors again in this episode. We last saw him in the pilot, I believe, Night of the Lizard. So here he is again. And Spider-Man, very un-Spider-Man like in this particular episode. He's kind of guilt-tripping Kurt here because Kurt is, of course, believing what JJ has put out there on the airwaves and in the paper that, yeah, Spider-Man is not a good guy. He stole something from the shuttle there. So Spider-Man was letting him know, yo, I helped you when you needed it. Now I need you to analyze this suit for me because I don't think it's doing me any favors, and I think something's wrong with me here. So this is, where I first found out that the suit was a symbiote. And immediately I wanted to know more about this thing, where it came from, possibly how it was created, what all that it had seen, because, it's a sentient life form. I figured, okay, this thing is an alien. What's it been up to before it bonded to Spider-Man? Who might it have bonded to before? I remember thinking all these things as a kid of 11 and watching this for the first time as Kurt is begging Spider-Man to take the suit off. And Spider-Man, of course, he's bound and determined to head to Brock's apartment and try to find the photos so he can clear his name. I liked seeing Kingpin and Smythe yet again in this episode. They are on Cloud 9 because of the Prometheum X that they acquired in the last episode. But Kingpin is letting his love for money get the best of him. Smythe hasn't had any opportunities to study this thing. Kingpin is just interested in selling this thing off in little bits, so, he can acquire more money for his criminal empire. This guy is all about money. And, Smythe is really wanting to study it. I think he's mentioned that in the previous episode. But, Kingpin being Kingpin, he's not really interested in that. And I like the demonstration they have there, where you get to see just how powerful a little piece of the Prometheum is. I wonder who those guys were that were wanting to buy the Prometheum X. I don't know if they're just no-name mobsters that we never see again. I wish we could have known more about them. But I like that Jim Cummings is doing quite a bit of voice work in this episode. He does Mr. No Name, the guy who's interested in buying the Prometheum X, I do believe. And we see him as Shocker in this episode as well. Before the episode aired, one of my buddies, Rick, I believe, he had some Spider-Man trading cards. I don't know if they came in some cereal or whatever, but he was reading them aloud to me, and that's how I first heard of the Shocker. I don't know if it was from the animated series or they were more aligned with the comics, but that's how I first heard of the Shocker, maybe a week or two before I watched the episode. I know it was a March, not a March day. It would have been a late April day, and we were sitting on the swings, and he was reading to me about the Shocker, whatever that little trading card said. And I thought that was cool. Then he showed up in the alien costume here. Because, you have John, and he starts mumbling to JJ about the guy in the rhino costume. He's in the hospital and he's starting to talk about what he saw. And, JJ now realizes that, oh, crud, well, Brock played me for a fool. He's, as JJ says, he colored the truth and left out facts. And JJ's not keen to that at all. Now, never mind the fact that JJ will sometimes do a lot of rage baiting. Like before he actually gets the facts straight, he'll, release a story. I think we'll see it more than once about how Spider-Man is responsible for this and that and the other. So he's a bit hypocritical, but in this situation, I like that he decides to be the better man, and he's like, no, I'm not publishing this. You straight up lied about what you saw here. You didn't give me the whole truth. And so Brock is fired yet again. And, this is what leads us to Shocker being sent to grab the photos because Kingpin gets wind of it. And I remember, hearing this part of the episode when Kingpin's like, who is Eddie Brock? Is this going to be able to be traced back to me? I can't have this. And I remember thinking, well, that would be really cool if Spider-Man realized that there was a mysterious player in the game involved. But I didn't get that in this episode. I had to wait a long time before Spider-Man finally found out about the Kingpin. We found out who Fisk was, and we'll get to see that after the Alien costume trilogy. We get to see him actually meeting Fisk, but he doesn't find out about Fisk's alter ego for quite a while in the show. But I like that Spider-Man is in the dark for quite a while in this incarnation of the animated series. So we're introduced to Shocker because he is sent to destroy the photos of the crash site. And it's one of my favorite fight scenes in Spider-Man. I think I knew that the Shocker had those, electricity firing gloves and fired electric bolts out of his gloves. I had this action figure, but I wouldn't get him for several months. I found him in the fall of 1995. But I love the look of him. He's got that mask and he's got the little wrist blasters on. He would fire missiles, but they were shaped to look like little bolts that fired out of his wrists. And that fight scene there before we go to commercial was one of my favorites. Jim Cummings is really doing a fantastic job as Shocker. And Brock gets away, which I really liked. He's still out there. He's still a loose cannon in the episode. I never really found out ultimately, and I'm guessing ultimately the photos got destroyed, but I never really found out what happened to the pics that Brock had. I think he might have hid them in the shower. They were wanting them for a bit, but Brock got away. You get to see Spider-Man tailing Shocker, and then he steals the Prometheum X. And Peter being Peter, I mean, he's still got enough common sense in him to do some research on the Prometheum. And I like what he finds out, and he decides to take it with him as he goes to save John in the episode. Because, now they want to ransom John. Kingpin gets Shocker to kidnap John Jameson from his hospital room. That was a really creepy scene there. And we get the fight scene there as Spider-Man heads to wherever they're holding John. And it's just like Jameson to call for Spider-Man when he needs him, and then he treats him like he's nothing the rest of the time. But now that he needs Spider-Man, but note that he doesn't say please. He's like, yeah, if you're listening to the sound of my voice, I need your help. And I love how Spider-Man's like, well, I'm doing this for John, old man, not for you. So, I mean, he's still wanting to do the right thing and help people, but the symbiote is really hindering him at this point. And Brock, I love how he shows up there. I mean, he doesn't do much. I think he's wielding some kind of a chain as the big fight between Spider-Man and the Shocker starts. But, I mean, he doesn't really last that long. And I wasn't sure how this was going to play out. But I love how Spider-Man just kind of goes insane toward the end of the episode. And he is just screaming at Shocker, screaming that he's going to chase him to the ends of the earth, which made me think of Aladdin. Disney's Aladdin. That had been out for a minute. I owned the VHS, and when I was watching the episode for the first time, I was like, man, this guy is really, really going off the deep end here as Spider-Man is pursuing Shocker. And he ultimately crushes, I think, Shocker's wrist blasters. And he almost, not quite, but almost lets him fall to his unaliving. And I like how he thinks of Uncle Ben, and that's what brings him back to himself here. But then, of course, the suit has a mind of its own, and it goes ahead and pushes the Shocker over the edge anyway. But Spider-Man is still able to web him up and, save his life. Good thing, too. I love the ending of the episode. I don't think I knew what had happened right away, because you've got Brock. He was webbed up by Spider-Man in the fight because, as Spider-Man says, he's going to save Eddie for dessert, so Eddie's webbed up. And then you've got the suit, as Spider-Man remembers at the end of the episode that, the suit can't stand loud noises. I don't know if it's a church bell or a bell tower, or probably more like a bell tower. Could be a church bell. It would have been cool if it had been a church, because that's where Eddie is bonded with the symbiote, I do believe, in the comics, but I'm not sure if they did that in the animated series or not. But yeah, the suit is it apparently blocked that from Spider-Man's mind. So I like that it really was able to mess with this guy's head. It did block that bit of information out of Spidey's mind, but then as he hears the noise and feels the suit's pain, he's like, oh yeah, you block this from my mind to protect yourself. And you get that really creepy scene after the symbiote is detached from Spidey, and it's growling at him. I don't know for sure, but I always wondered if it was Jim Cummings doing the symbiote growling, because from what I've heard, this guy can do some really freaky animal noises, and they might have done a bit of pitch shifting on Jim's voice, but I always wondered if Jim didn't do all of the venom growls here for the symbiote. I'm not sure. I don't know if there's anything out there to corroborate it, but I've always kind of wondered if it had been Jim Cummings doing the symbiote growls. But yeah, toward the end of the episode, Eddie is finally bonded with the symbiote, and I thought it was just the suit talking at the end of the episode when he says, "Spider-Man, enjoy your fame while it lasts," and then we go to the big to be continued. Luckily, though, we got the promo, I think, right after this had aired. And when Eddie says we call ourselves Venom, I was like, oh, that's who that guy is. Oh, wow. You know, I had no idea what we were seeing on screen. Because as I say in all of these videos about 90s shows, there was no audio description. So when we got the promo for Alien Costume Part 3 at the end of Part 2, which is going to be airing that following Saturday, I was a bit more than excited to see Venom and what he was going to do, because I mean, you know, the symbiote knew who Spider-Man was. I didn't know if that knowledge was going to be passed on to Eddie, but of course it was. And I remember just that week leading up to Part 3, it lasted forever, because I mean, my mind had been blown. I wanted to know more about you know, what the suit was going to do to Eddie, how long he would have the suit. One thing about this show and Venom, I wish he had lasted more than just... We only see Eddie in the suit for, I believe, 3 episodes, really. And, man, that just wasn't enough for me. I loved this character, and I think the one critique about the show, for me anyway, is that it needed more Venom. It needed more symbiote, and we didn't really get much of that. But I guess, you know, less is more, and... it was just such a cool way to introduce the suit and Venom in this incarnation. I wish that comic books had alt text, or they made audio adaptations of a lot of the arcs from Spider-Man, because I would love to know how that arc went down in the pages of the Spider-Man comics. I know that Eddie's in a church and that he... you know, he's out of a job. I think he's got cancer in the comics, and that's how he... you know, he gets bonded to the symbiote like that in the comics. But boy, I'd love to read that. That would be an awesome thing for Marvel to do, is to provide some alt text with the comic books. I wouldn't even care if my screen reader had to read it. You know, that's how much I would love to get into these books eventually. The comics. I think that's doable. But, I mean, I just don't know if there's really a market for that. I hope that there would be eventually. I think a lot of folks not able to see, and, you know, folks with very low vision would really appreciate alt text. But that's a video for another day. I'm rambling because I love this 3-parter so much, and I'm going to call this a video. Till next time, true believers, when we discuss Alien Costume Part 3.